Welcome back to Grinding to a Halt. This week, I'm having a conversation with Alex Goldman. You probably know him best from his time on ReplyAll. He's currently the producer on Western Kabuki. He is also the driving force behind the band Slow Fawns. We cover a lot of topics on this episode. Everything from his time at ReplyAll, what it was like putting together a show that is that massive, his decision to step away from that show, what he's been up to since then, his thoughts on a Tales from the Crypt revival. We talk about prank phone calls, the overall state of the podcasting industry, and kind of where things are sitting now with oversaturation and big tech companies coming in and buying up shows and what that does to those shows. It was a pleasure to pick his brain for a little while, get to spend some time talking to him, and I really hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Thank you for listening. Alex, thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
me.
thanks for having
Um,
me.
it's been funny trying to get a show off the ground when I'm reaching out to people. I'm like, hey, so here's my idea. I have zero proof of concept. You want to talk to me? And and honestly, everybody's been like, yeah, no, that sounds like a lot of fun.
I mean, the only way to prove a concept is to make a proof of concept. So,
Yeah.
someone's got to say yes.
Yeah. And luckily, a lot of people have said yes, which is very encouraging. There's a few people that I've reached out to that I know I'll never hear from, but I'm like, hey, you got to shoot a couple big shots and see what happens.
I'm of the opinion that anytime anyone is trying to make something in the audio space, like if they're like, hey, can I go to lunch with you and pick your brain, or can I have you on my show? Unless they're like obviously white supremacists or something, unless they have odious views, I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, I'm just sort of like, I'm of the opinion that everybody should have a fighting chance to see their ideas through, even if their
Yeah.
ideas are failures. I've had that opportunity plenty of times, so I would very much like to give that to other people if they want me to be involved in any way.
That's honestly, that's kind of how I've been positioning it to people. Because, like, I have a full time day job. And then people are like, so, like, is this the goal? Is like to make money on this? I'm like, realistically, I will never make a penny off of this. This
Right.
is, can I do it? Like, is it something that I can take from concept to execution? And even if just my wife and a couple of my friends listen, like, that's a win because at least I made something. I moved it beyond just, hey, here's an idea, or I thought of a catchy title.
Right.
And like it exists now.
I'm
That's what
sort
I'm
of
into.
I am of the opinion that like we have basically reached the point where no creative endeavors are there. There's going to be like a tiny subset of people who are going to be living off of their creative endeavors.
Yeah,
So you got to do it for the love of the game.
it's too niche, and I'm fine with that. I like things that can't scale. Again, having a marketing background, everything has to 10x, and I
Right.
fucking hate that so much because art does not scale
Yeah. I
indefinitely.
hate that too. I hate that too.
Cool. Just kind of jumping in. I like to kick off by just finding out who people are, where they come from. As I'm talking to more and more people, I'm getting a lot of through lines of like, this is the kind of kid I was. And then when they start talking about it, like, it makes a lot of sense why I do what I do. In these conversations, people are like, well, I was a kid that, nobody could say no to me. I was going to get what I wanted no matter what. And I was going to steamroll. I was going to get things that I wanted. It was just going to happen. Or like, I was just super into learning every minute detail of something. And then they become a creative, and their job is to figure out minute details of things and put those together into a larger picture. And obviously, listening to Reply All, it sounds like you would be a person that was really into the minute details and figuring out how things work and exploring those ideas. Was that something you were into as a kid, or was that something that's more of a skill you
Mm,
learned?
Not at all. I think that if anything, if there's any through line in my life that caused me to go in the direction I did, it's that I have this incredibly well developed, even if it's not necessarily correct, an incredibly well developed sense of like fairness and unfairness.
Yeah.
And when things are unfair, it pisses me off. It makes me so fucking mad. And so I will. Here's a great example. I got a $60 parking ticket last week,
Mm,
and because the municipality I live in does not allow people to park their cars on the street from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. So I got a $60 parking ticket. And a friend of mine who was also staying at my house
mm-hmm.
got a ticket. And so I said to them, I was like, listen, don't pay this ticket. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to
Yeah.
fight mine as well. So like I spent 4 hours on Zoom waiting for the judge to get to my case like last week, 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
because I absolutely think that it's ridiculous. Also, I'm right on the line of the town that I live in and technically have a zip code in another town. So
Yeah.
I was like there and I was like, I'm not even in your fucking town. I'm not going to pay shit. Neither are they. And they were like, okay. But like
I love that.
that is the thing that drives me, is just like this idea that there are things that are fundamentally unfair and should be fought regardless of how big or impactful they actually are.
I love that so much. I found that as I've gotten older, I've leaned more and more into that, even with things that are like microaggressions.
Again, like I'm not a super confrontational person in
Yeah.
life, I don't think, but the other day, this was probably 6 months or so ago, I was in Target at the return desk and the guy in front of me was being an asshole. And I just
Mm-hmm.
said, I was like, you need to stop. I got like right up in his face. And I was like, you need to stop talking to these people this way.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like, if we need to go outside and have a conversation, and I wasn't trying to threaten him, I was like,
Yeah.
you need to calm down. Like, if you want to go outside and calm down, we can talk about this. But like, you need to stop talking to these people this way. And afterward, very kindly, they were like, thank you so much, and tried to give me a $10 gift certificate to Target. I was like, guys, it's cool. It's just like, I don't know. There is there is like no dignity in working in customer service. I've
Yeah.
done it. I did it for over a decade. It fucking sucks. Um, and so to you just have to claw back whatever sort of dignity you can have.
Yeah.
And that led me to a confrontation that like in most circumstances I would not have engaged in.
Yeah.
But again, that's like the sense of fairness thing that like just it's a really like a compulsion. I don't know where it came from. My dad is a judge, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's it. It's not like we talked about his judginess when I was a kid. Um, so I don't know why that is, but that is sort of where all of that stems from, I think.
That's so funny. No, but that also makes sense in thinking about the types of stories you would work on, whether it be with ReplyAll or even the stuff you're doing now with Western Kabuki. Like the types of conversations you're having when you choose to pipe in, being more on just the behind the scenes producer side. It is when things are clearly unfair and you'd be like, no, that is absolute bullshit. Like you.
I mean, you know, I actually find myself not wanting to talk on the show so much.
Mhm.
I love the personalities of the hosts of Western Kabuki, and I'd like want to leave it with them. But every once in a while, I'm just like, oh, you guys need to know this other
Yeah.
outrageous fact. Or in the case of fucking what's his name, Brian Krasenstein, fuck that guy. Like
I
from the bottom of my heart,
yeah.
that guy's such a fucking coward.
I listened to the first one. I couldn't do the second episode. I can't stomach those people. It's not something I could subject myself to.
I mean, I will say the guy is like he knows how to bob and weave and not take any responsibility for his behavior. I was impressed by like his absolute unwillingness to like cop to anything.
Yeah.
Not impressed in a good way, but still impressed.
He's like the perfect model of like the guy you see on LinkedIn who posts about how successful he is. And like
Yeah.
everything is a spin on how good I am at everything I ever do, and there's no way anyone can touch me. Those guys are absolutely that. So I don't want to spend too much time on Reply All because the show is what it is. It's over. I loved it while it was happening. I think it was honestly the second podcast I ever listened to.
That's
And
awesome.
it was one of those things where like I would drive into my office. I had a 90-minute commute each way. And when an episode would drop, I would drive into the office and we would talk about it like as a group, like everybody in the agency that I sat around, we all listened to it. So like it was a communal event listening to that show for me. So it has a very like special place in my memory because of that.
That's
Um,
great. I love that.
no, it was super positive. I love it. And what I loved about it is, and this really goes to what you were saying about your disdain for injustice, is just how human the show is. I feel like so much of reporting, especially as, people's politics come into it or people try to put politics onto it, it loses its humanity, where the root of that show is based in the humanity and the human experience of being a person on the internet now, which
One of
is
the things we figured out really quickly was if we tried to make an episode about a concept, if we were like,
mm,
okay, well, here's a heady concept that is taking place in the world but feels important to us, like it wouldn't play. It
yeah,
only played when there was like when we put a person in the middle of it.
yeah,
So even if there was like an idea, I was like, I want to explore this idea. It was always like, okay, find the person,
yeah.
because just talking about an idea doesn't really, it's not compelling.
No, no,
And
it's really fucking boring to listen to someone
yeah,
explain. It's a YouTube explainer video, and I'm not into that. That's not what I'm looking
right.
for. I need that human connection. I know you're a horror movie guy. I am a massive horror fan. And like when people ask what you like about it, I'm like, well, good horror is about human experience. Like that's the ones that genuinely scare me are the ones that make me feel for the people in this outrageous situation. Like it can be the dumbest movie, but if the character is good,
Right.
uh, Godzilla minus one is a perfect example. There is such a human story in a giant lizard movie that like people in the theater are crying and like that shouldn't happen because we know it's not real, but the humanity just pulls you in. You can't fight it. It's just good. It's captivating. And that's honestly what
That's
I
how I
love.
feel about that's how I feel about Drag Me to Hell, a movie that is
Oh, I
totally
love,
ridiculous, but
yeah,
at its heart is a story about a person who has let their avarice get the best of them and is now, it's like it's a parable. It's
yeah.
just but I fucking love that movie. So out of control, but so human at its core.
The goat, the talking goat in the exorcism scene is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It's so good. It's classic Raimi. I love every second of it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really good.
but the thing that interests me most about Reply All is not the show itself, but the show ending. Like walking away from something is never easy, regardless of the situation, the behind the scenes factors. I don't care about any of that stuff. I think that's irrelevant. But just the act of taking a thing that is successful and that you had built, and I assume you could have stayed at and could still be there if so chose, but walking away from it, what is that mix of emotions in a show that is so clearly about finding connection with people and telling these human stories to then walk away from something that you've put together and has grown and has this impact? What's that feel like? How do you come to that decision where you're like, yeah, okay, this is done? Was it just it's not what I want it to be anymore? um
The agony of making it was greater than the agony of making it. Um, I don't know. I mean, I didn't like working for Spotify. I think
yeah,
that working for a big company is not for me.
yeah,
And it was kind of a death by a thousand cuts thing, where it just felt like, I mean, when we started it, it was just this thing we made. And then
yeah,
when it hit, which I'm grateful for and I'm so happy about and don't regret at all, et cetera, et cetera. Like it became this thing that was, leaden with expectation, and we always
yeah,
had to be outdoing ourselves, and we always had to
yeah,
go bigger, and that resulted in that I think that was something that we took on, which maybe was not necessarily accurate,
hmm,
but there was this idea that we had to keep making this thing bigger and bigger, and then the result was we were making longer episodes, more ambitious episodes, um and putting them out less, and
yeah,
the speed with which we were putting them out started to feel really, really bad. And I mean, one of the things about doing a show that is specific to one topic is you can do one version of each story. You can do
yeah,
like I can't, the people were like, keep doing more hacking stories. And I was like, well, we've touched on all the big ways that people get hacked. Like, there's not
yeah,
really a way to do these stories again. You can do one story about a person who inadvertently goes viral, and that's it. That's all you get. You then have to
yeah,
go do something else. So, I was starting to burn out because I was starting to run out of ideas.
hmm,
And it was becoming this thing where we had to constantly go bigger and bigger. And then I don't know, I was just not enjoying working at the company.
yeah,
Walking away from it sucked. I thought I was going to do it for the rest of my life.
yeah.
I am not sure that it is a thing that would still be going today. As of yesterday, Spotify laid off
Yeah, I saw that.
Many successful shows, including a a Pulitzer Prize and Peabody Award winning show. They shut down, and they shut down Heavyweight, which just I think the same day ended up on the New York Times Best Podcast of the Year.
Yeah.
So the profit motive was obviously way more important to them. So uh, I don't know that Reply All would still be around. I
Yeah.
think that maybe they would have cut us,
Yeah.
but I have no idea.
And honestly, the finite nature of it to me only increases its value. I like things that end. To me, there is beauty in something having a beginning and middle and end. Like I like that. It's for the
I
same reason
mean,
I don't watch TV shows that have 20 seasons because I'm like, well, I don't care. I know nothing of substance can happen if it's on forever.
there's a thing that happens so halfway through the creation of a thing. I think Corey Sika, who has written for a million different places, New York
Hmm.
Magazine, the New York Times style section. I can't remember where he's writing now. He said to PJ early on something like, "You have 2 years where everybody will be on your side and they want you to succeed, and after that, people are going to turn on you in ways that you can't like that you won't expect." And it's absolutely true. I mean, this,
Yeah.
the audience bifurcated between people who are like they're boring and people who are like they want to make they just wanted us to make the same stuff over and over again. People
Yeah.
who are like they're woke now. People who like everyone had
Yeah.
a fucking opinion about it. And it's not fun to make a show for people like that. It's not fun to make
Yeah.
a show for people who are mad at you for not doing the thing they want you to do, which I think is a symptom of internet culture and stan
Oh,
culture.
absolutely.
I don't know. That part wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But was manageable, at least until PJ left, and then it became way, way worse. It was just people constantly being pissed at us all the time.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny you say that. There's a British metalcore band called Architects, and they've been around for I don't know 20 years. They put out a ton of albums, and over the last few years, they've gotten more and more melodic. Moved from super heavy, very technical guitar playing to very melody driven, huge choruses, and it's paid off. They had a number one album. They're playing massive arenas. But the internet culture around people, especially in the metal scene, they don't like when bands change. They want the same chugs all the time. Don't change. Like, give me a breakdown of a chug and a china, and we'll be good to go. So yesterday they released a song called Seeing Red, and their caption online was just, "Are you happy now?" And it's literally everything you can possibly do sonically to make like a hardcore and metalcore song. But then the lyrics are calling out all the people who say you don't do this anymore. And pretty much it's a song telling him to go touch grass. It's the equivalent. And
I
people are
mean,
eating it up. I love it. I love it.
I also feel like an asshole for complaining because people were really kind to us.
Yeah.
And I don't discount that, and I'm really grateful for it. But also, I am way too vain and I'm way too vain a person to not read my critics.
Yeah.
So the result of that is like I just kind of like the amount of anger people had toward me about things that were like very much outside of my control. Really, it got to me after a while. So
Yeah, no, I feel like I will be the same because when you care about something, when empathy is in your nature, you're gonna really care what people say about you. Assuming anyone beyond people that know me ever listen to this, like I've had people on calls because I make calls and I talk for a living mention my voice before. Like, and I know in podcasts people love to talk about people's voice or like, hey, your voice is grating or annoying or you speak really high for a dude. Stuff like that. Like, I know those things are coming if anyone listens and I know I will
yeah.
see it. So it's just about how do I switch that off and try to care as little as possible and not let it deter me from doing the thing that actually matters, which is just putting myself out there regardless of how it's received.
Yeah. I mean, uh I do think that it's like for me, it's like I can get a million compliments and then one person can say some sour thing and it will
Yeah.
fuck my day up. And that's my problem. That's not theirs. But
Yeah.
that is like a contributing factor to like uh, really actually enjoying kind of being in the background for Western Kabuki for the most part. Like
Yeah.
I like that aspect of it.
Does that aspect of it feel really nice to be that hands off. Like you can, like you said, you can pipe in when you want. You know, obviously they're very giving. It is, you are the fourth member of the show. It's never discussed as like, oh, Alex is just the producer. Like it is wholly
No,
inclusive.
everybody's they're the best.
Yeah.
They like we did not know each other before we started making this. They
Yeah.
were just like, we're looking for a producer. I said I can show up and do this, and that was it. That was all we did. And they have been so on board with me. They're just unbelievably sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like kind of I mean the reason I wanted to do it is because I enjoyed listening to them, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't need to. I've said enough into a microphone. I can take a little break.
Speaking of breaks, so you left ReplyAll. That was what, 2022.
Yeah.
So, and I love the last episode because it's you pitching to me what is something that needs to happen, which is
Oh, the Crypt
a resurrection of
TV show.
of Tales from the Crypt. And I know you said like that's all tangled up, and even the name is owned by someone different. I've referred to it as BoJack Corpseman. Would be
Yes, that's a great name for it.
so
That
like I know that's obviously like pipe dream things that are too expensive to ever happen. But what are some of the things that you have been focusing on or wanted to pursue? I mean, as you can see, I've got the Slow Fonz LP behind me.
oh
Like,
hell yeah.
I am a fan of the things you do, not just like when I like a person, I just pursue what that person does. I'm like, whatever they do, I want to consume it because I like the way their brain puts things together. So, what are some of the other
Uh,
things that you're working on or hoping to
I
do?
wish that there was more that I was working on. I bet like the podcast industry is in a very bad shape right
Yeah,
now.
oversaturation for sure, and then that
Especially
10Xification.
when it comes to making things that are that require journalism.
Yeah,
That require a budget.
yeah,
And are not made by celebrities. It's just not, there's no market for it right now. So
yeah,
I've been pitching stuff for a year and getting rejections nonstop, which
yeah,
is sucks ass. It's not fun.
yeah,
But I don't know. I still want to make stuff. More than that, I'd just like to have a job. I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, Western Kabuki's a gig, but it's
yeah,
we're a small time operation. We're lean.
yeah. Well, until
So
Santos comes on, it's gonna happen, and then
oh
that's
my
when it's
god,
gonna
dude!
blow
If
up.
George Santos comes on, oh, I mean, we got Marianne Williamson on there.
Yeah, I saw that went live this morning.
We every once in a while we get someone where I'm like, oh damn, and then Caleb's like, yeah, I've been working on this for a year.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I'm really happy working on that.
yeah,
I would like it to grow. If we can figure out ways to do that, we're gonna keep doing it. I have had like 5 or 6 ideas, some really crazy, some really conventional. And everything basically I get a polite like, oh, we think you're really great and like we really respect what you do, but we need like you want too much, you want to make something too expensive.
yeah, yeah. And then just with the way the numbers games work, like you said, the amount of time it takes to put something complicated together. They want weekly releases, or there's so many daily shows that are coming out. That way, they can hit those stream numbers per month. So their advertising revenue can be what it needs to be. And it definitely doesn't sound like that's the type of show you are interested in making. Is one where it's just a content mill.
I mean, I'd love to be putting stuff out on a more regular basis
Yeah.
than we were by the end of ReplyAll, but like also reporting takes time and sometimes stories don't
Yep.
pan out. A lot of times stories don't pan out. I would
Yeah.
say we were at a ratio of like 1 to 8, maybe 1 to 10, where
Mhm.
like we would pursue 10 things to various degrees. Like, we'd do
Yeah.
a couple interviews on something, or we'd get a third of a way through a story and hit a dead end, or find out the answer wasn't that interesting. Um, and I mean, that's the kind of stuff I want to do. In order to explain the world, you have to like actually understand it, and the
Yeah.
understanding requires time and money,
Yeah.
and there's no appetite for that right now.
Yeah.
And that's not just in podcasts, that's fucking everywhere. Like
Oh
everyone I
yeah.
know who works in TV, they're like, oh, I can't get anything made. Everyone I
Yep.
know who works in like who like makes YouTube stuff, they're like, all the advertisers are bailing. Like it's tough out there.
Yeah.
Um But I don't know. I'm hopeful. In the meantime, I'm just working on Western Kabuki, and then I've been talking with a friend about starting to do a show where we just make prank phone calls because I have a real predilection toward, which is always like has always been like a long term. Like I've always really wanted to do a
Yeah.
prank phone call show.
I,
And I think
I
that we're like in a weird renaissance of prank phone calls right now. There's just like really, really great stuff out there
yeah.
that I enjoy quite a bit.
I am a sucker for those. I don't know if you've heard the show. Do you know who Jason Segel is?
Yeah, yeah. So I was a number one Bone Zone fan. Like I
Yeah.
was the biggest fucking Bone Zone fan in the world. I think it might be the best podcast ever made.
It's so good.
For anyone who is not familiar, Bone Zone is a podcast where two comedians. It was like it's really hard to explain because it's like it was like free associating almost.
yeah.
But they would like come on one day and be like, "Hey, do you want to like call people and boss some people around?" And then they'd be like, "Well, who should we call?" And they'd be like, "Oh, well, Hugo Boss, obviously." So they'd call Hugo Boss and be like, "Listen, I'm gonna need you to put me on the phone with one of your customers right now." Just so inspired and so weird. And that one of them went on to do a podcast called "Do You Know Who Jason Segel Is," where he would call people and ask them if they knew who Jason Segel was, which
And then
also really.
inadvertently ended up selling waterbeds. Like that
Oh yeah, yeah. Like
storyline.
a big the waterbed B story of that thing was really bizarre. They called a waterbed guy and were constantly trying to get members of their audience to buy a waterbed, which some did.
Yeah, a guy did in
Um,
Vegas, and then they went to his house and recorded an episode in his house.
One of the things that I remember most clearly is them. One of the things they did is they called a pet shop and they were like, "Hey, yeah, I've got a waterbed and I wanted there to be sharks in it." And so they were like trying to get them to give them a shark so they could put it in. And the person was like, "No, it wouldn't survive." And they're like, "I think it," but they're like, "Don't you think it would look really cool though?" I think we should give it a shot. So,
And then they would ask if the person on the phone knows who Jason Segel is, and
right,
then that was the bit. It was so
that was the
good,
entire thing.
so
And
good.
some enterprising Redditor for the "Do You Know Who Jason Segel Is" subreddit made a spreadsheet of how many people actually knew who Jason Segel was. It was an incredibly low number.
Yeah, for the guy who was on one of the biggest shows on
Yeah, I
TV
know.
for a decade.
Very funny.
All right. Before that tangent, I was going to ask about mental health and how you balance the rejections or just you said, even being at ReplyAll towards the end, the amount of work it took to put that together and I know this personally as someone who I've always had depression. It's always been part of my life. It's always something I've worked to try to keep in check. But I am a client facing person. My job is to get on a call and be happy and like make people feel good. So finding ways to balance, hey, today I feel like absolute shit and my brain is telling me to do terrible things. Like, but now I have to get on this call and be happy. So like trying to force myself into those mindsets. How do you balance that as, when you were working at ReplyAll trying to put together a story, trying to record a story? Obviously you can't get on mic and be depressed because people can hear it, like it shows.
I think I got pretty good at faking it. That's
Yeah.
one thing. And I think that what's the term they use for people who have autism? Masking? I think that
Yeah.
I think I got pretty good at masking my
Yeah.
depression, and stuff like that. I mean, I also had a team of amazing people
Yeah.
who could hold my hand in those moments. And I mean, the difference between, having to get on a sales call, which I think is what you have to do, or,
Yeah.
a marketing call,
Yeah.
and actually like making a thing that you enjoy making, it's enough to be like, well, okay, shit's bad, but I'm doing this thing that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, the difference, of course, is I love reporting and I
Mm-hmm.
fucking hate editing more than anything in the world. So like when it came to editing, I just felt like that was the real struggle for me, was like
Yeah.
getting through those moments where I was just like, I'm not doing well and I'm not enjoying this. And the way that ReplyAll edited also was really insane. Like, I mean, it was something that we learned from the people who taught us how to make radio, like the This American Life folks. But the
Yeah.
way that it worked is we would all get into a room and sit there with a paper copy of the story and read the story while we play the pieces of tape. And then it was like a struggle session.
Yeah.
We'd sit there for like 3 or 4 hours, taking apart every piece, what worked and what didn't. And for a person who is like feeling very raw,
Yeah.
it's really hard. Like it took me years to train myself to be like, you know what, this is in service of the story. This isn't an assessment of me as a reporter. It was so fucking hard to get into that mindset of being like, yeah, this is not about the quality of my reporting. This is about making this the most accessible, most comprehensible, and like most interesting version of the story.
Yeah.
But there was a long period of time where when people didn't like a story, when they were like, this isn't working, or this part of it isn't working, I was like, oh, it's because you think I'm shitty at this, and because
Yeah.
like I'm a worthless piece of garbage and I should be tossed in a dumpster, and you guys can go ahead and do that because I don't want to work here.
Yeah.
um and that would come out in some ways. I think that we're not great. I think that I did okay, like I wasn't an abusive prick, but like I
Hmm.
could get defensive, I
Yeah.
think, like anybody can, about their work. And it you know, it was that was the hardest part for me, is like having to um make the thing as good as possible while not feeling very good.
Yeah.
The actual process of interviewing people, like that's always come pretty easily to me. And I think after a while, I mean, I don't know about in marketing, but like after a while, it just became like, oh, I know how to this, I can do this relatively effortlessly.
Oh yeah. No, a good example. A couple years ago, mentally, I was in absolute worst space I have ever been in. Um, I got on calls, powered through all my calls, like it was a quote unquote great day. Like everything was going really good. And then like I closed my laptop and just like crumbled onto the floor. Like couldn't speak a word. I was just done because I'm really good at switching off that part of me and like, oh, it's work mode. Now I'm work Zach. Like work Zach is gonna come through and get shit done,
Right.
and I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
gonna think about the other stuff I've got to do. And then that was a day where I really realized how much like the powering through method was just damaging me as a person. And now I really needed to take a step back and be like, hey, maybe this job is like killing me. This might actually be really bad for me.
Oh, God.
But I feel like that's more and more common as I'm talking to people about this type of thing, especially people who have client facing jobs or jobs where they are the face of a company or the face of a brand. People are like, oh yeah, no, I feel that. Like I feel like I have to be a version of myself that I don't necessarily even like to get my job done sometimes. Which is it's interesting, especially in people I'm talking to who have creative jobs where they feel like they've almost lost track of themselves in the creativity in pursuit of the creation, not even in the pursuit of the art at this point, because it's become a money generator and it's become this whole other thing that they've kind of lost track of what the root was.
It's hard.
Mm.
And it also feels like kind of embarrassing to complain about,
Oh,
because like
absolutely.
oh yeah, you have like a dream job. You get to go and slake your curiosity for the
Yeah.
like for, you know, whatever you want. Like you get to go
Yeah.
in and just like see whatever sort of tickles your fancy.
Yeah.
What do I have to complain about? Like that's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to say that stuff, but also, you know, it's true.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that because I've had jobs, and even my job now, people are like, no, that's great. Like, my job is not to do that much work. My job is to tell other people to do work, and then I talk about the work in a way that makes clients feel good. Like, hey, here's what we did for you. The numbers are going up, everything's good. But for me, there's no fulfillment in that. It serves a purpose. It pays my mortgage. Like
Mm-hmm.
my kids have health insurance. But for me, I feel just as empty at the end of the day doing that job as if like I just sat on the couch and did nothing. Like there's nothing fulfilling in it, which is why for me it's important to find things like this where I'm like, no, I need to do something that does spark an interest in me and that does pursue a creation as opposed to just a regurgitation of something someone else did, which is really what my job is at this point.
Well, I mean, the trade off there is like the trade off with a job where you're like, this is fundamentally unfulfilling, but it pays the mortgage.
Yeah.
Is at the end of the day, you get to like step up away from your phone and your computer, and like you can,
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't always the case, but this is often the case, and you get to live your life.
Yeah.
And like the thing with making that show is like, holy shit, I was so grateful. It was amazing. It was so successful. I mean, it was really wonderful. People were so nice to us. We got so many opportunities. I met so
Yeah.
many amazing people during the course of the reporting. But when I got up and stepped away from the show, I was Alex Goldman from ReplyAll. And like I
Yeah.
couldn't step away from that role. And to some degree,
Yeah.
I still can't.
Yeah.
It's like just a thing that I am now. And I didn't
Mhm.
realize going into it, like I had no concept of what that meant going into it.
Yeah.
There's a tweet that Lady Gaga posted once, which was just all caps. I found it so self-indulgent, but I also secretly kind of agree with it, where she wrote, "Fame is a prison." I thought it was really funny, but what I thought was funnier was that someone responded and said, "Shouldn't have went on stage and did a duet with Bradley Cooper then." And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, if you didn't want this kind of attention, like you had the opportunity not to have it, and now you
Yeah.
have it. And it's a wonderful thing that so many people covet. You kind of just have to suck it up, which is
Yeah.
like what I've had to do. And my fame is 1/1 millionth of Lady Gaga's.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what she deals with, but I also can't imagine, what kind of insane life she leads. Like, I can't imagine how fancy and weird and indulgent her life is in a
Yeah.
way that mine was not and will never be.
No, I think those are things that even if before you started the show, you sat down with Lady Gaga and she explained, "Hey, here's what fame is like." You can't
I wouldn't have
comprehend it.
gotten it. I wouldn't have gotten
No,
it. I would have been like,
I
yeah, whatever. I can handle it.
well, I explain it to like people who don't have kids. I'm like, I can tell you what it's like to be a dad. You're not going to understand because you're not a dad. Like, it
Right.
fundamentally changed so much of who I am as a person,
Oh,
down
totally.
to my belief system changed when I had a kid. So, like, there's no way you can explain that to people who don't have kids. Like, I can't explain the love I have for these children. I cannot do it. And if I could, you would not understand it because you haven't felt it.
Right.
Getting towards wrapping up, I want you to explain the the Tales from the Crypt pitch because we talked about it briefly. I
Oh,
just
yeah,
want
totally.
other people to hear it because to me it is a genius idea.
Well, I always love, I mean, as a kid, like a huge part, Tales from the Crypt came out in more like 90, 91. So I was probably
Yeah.
12, 11 or 12. Um, I always found the Crypt Keeper to be the best part of the show because
Oh
it was
yeah.
like such a ridiculous juxtaposition to the ghoulish stuff. But
Yeah.
what do we really know about the Crypt Keeper, right? He's dead, I think.
Kind of.
He hangs out in a crypt. There is a lot of sort of meta textual information that you get over the course of the series and the movies that like he knows that he's being filmed.
Yeah.
And in I think the second season, there's a very weird episode about a sideshow freak that has sex with a mummy, and it turns out that their child is the Crypt Keeper. So canonically, in the show Tales from the Crypt, he is the son of a 2,000-year-old mummy and a sideshow freak. But we don't know much about him.
Yeah.
And the idea for the show was like we follow the Crypt Keeper, the actor, um, after Tales from the Crypt has been canceled, but he's still trying to like find his way in Hollywood. And I like, and he also is basically the same guy that he is on the show. Like it's like
Yeah.
all ridiculous puns, and it's all sort of like he's like still very macabre. He's sort of like got this Addams Family vibe, but he's also living in like the mortal world. And no one really, uh, no one really acknowledges the weird stuff about him. Like he just exists in the world. Like in my version, in my vision of it, like when Tales from the Crypt was very popular, he had a kid with a model, and now they're separated, and she's with like a used car dealer or something. Like I like the idea of him being divorced and being a single father and like having to deal with a lot of human problems while being like
Yeah.
comically inhuman.
I love it. It's such a perfect idea, and it made me so happy that that was your last segment on the show.
And I mean, I wrote like a pilot for it, but I'm not in the movie industry, and I don't know how
Yeah.
you make these kinds of things. I've talked to friends who do write for a living, and they're like, they were like, it's funny. It could use a lot of improvement because I don't know how to write for TV.
Yeah.
But they were also like, it's it's like ridiculous. Like, it's like, who is the audience for this? The audience for this is like guys, 40 something dads. It's me. The audience is
It's
me. And it's no one else. I was like, this feels like a thing Adult Swim would be into or something. And they were like,
yeah.
yeah, who watches Adult Swim knows who or what the Crypt Keeper is. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fair.
Yeah, it's you and me. We would have fun watching this show.
Oh my God, we'd have a blast. I do think that, like, in the same way that, like, there's a Child's Play TV show now, I think it
Yeah.
probably could have a home somewhere. But I also know that the actual, I mean, if I've learned anything from learning about the making of the TV show Alf, which is something that I find really fascinating, it the reason that Alf ended it, by my understanding, this could be wrong, but the reason it ended, by my understanding, is not because it was not popular, but because it was incredibly expensive to make, because in order to have the puppeteer for Alf, they had to make all the sets raised, and there was like constant malfunctions of the animatronic aspects of
Mm-hmm.
Alf, and like there was a lot of standing around waiting for them to set up the shots, and like
Yeah.
everyone fucking hated it, and it cost a ton of money. And like the Crypt Keeper is a complex puppet,
Yeah.
animatronic puppet. And believe me, I've learned quite a bit about him in the time that I have been that I've the thing that I learned about him is that he was made by the guy who made Chucky, and he actually has Chucky's eyes.
That's so
So
weird.
yeah, so he has Chucky's eyes. Um, but but with the exception of one of the Tales from the Crypt movies, you never see the Crypt Keeper standing. And
Yeah.
in that movie, in order to make that happen, they very crudely and very poorly mapped his face onto an actual human being, and it looked like shit. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine how you'd like make him move. Like, I don't know how you'd make this character move. It would be really expensive. But in order to make a show that's dynamic about a character, you can't just have him sit behind a desk the whole time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was all a pipe dream anyway, kind of. Even even John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper, sort of, when I pitched him the idea, was like, what? What are you talking about?
But it's even those things that hey, realistically, nothing will come from it. Looking into it, the pursuit of writing an episode, like there's fulfillment in that in and of
Oh,
itself.
definitely. It
Of
was
just
so my favorite ideas are like the ones that definitely won't work. One of the
yeah,
things that I was like pitching as a podcast idea that everybody was like, "Oh, sounds fun," would never work in a million years, was to get like a band or bands to like come to a studio and be like, "Okay, so here's the deal. You guys have to work." Let's say it's like, I don't know, let's say it's municipal waste.
mhm,
Municipal waste comes into the studio, and I say, okay, you have 90 minutes. You have to make a bluegrass song. Go. And then I would record the process of them making a song that is not their style of music. And they would have like a very brief period of time to do it. And I really tried super hard. I was like trying to pilot an episode with some friends of mine.
mhm.
And everybody was just like, this is the craziest idea. First of all, no one is going to go for this. Like, any artist is going to be like, fuck you. I
Yeah,
take myself more seriously than this. Second of all, there's like all that, like, record labels are very weird about licensing and who
yeah,
owns audio. And I was like, but it's just gonna be like a goof song. But can you imagine if you got fucking Radiohead to show up and do like a drum and bass, or like do it, not like a Miami bass song, and
yeah.
like they had 90 minutes to do it, and it ended up maybe sounding like shit, but still they had to.
But it ships no matter what. It's going out.
Yeah, like no matter what happens at the end of the episode, they have to listen to it, and they get like 90 minutes.
I love that.
Um
I love that
it was
idea.
but like that, I mean, I love trying to push ideas that
Yeah,
are that crazy, because when you actually pull them off, which we did rarely but occasionally, um it was always the best ones. It was always the
yeah,
craziest ones, you know?
yeah. Like picking up and going to India is an insane thing to do to find a
Totally.
telemarketer. But
Or
it
like
turned
getting
into
on,
this saga that like I got so invested in.
yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. And like, getting on like a Discord call with some scammers and getting them to give someone $100 in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like great, great. What a treat. And who would have thought that would be possible? Anyway,
I love it. I love it. Thank you for coming on. I will support whatever of these crazy ideas get made. I'm in for the long ride. It's fun. Even if it's just more Slow Fonz albums, I'm here for that too.
thanks, Zach.
So
I appreciate that.
keep it coming. I
All right,
appreciate what
man.
you do. Thanks,
Thanks
Alex.
so much.